All right, so have you heard this one? This guy, he's on a first-class flight to Tokyo, feeling pretty important, and starts ranting about Elon Musk. He has no idea the quiet guy right next to him is actually Elon Musk. I bet you can just imagine how that went down. You might have seen the story online, but we're going to go way beyond the headlines in this deep dive and really look at the source material.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that just seems too good to be true. But it really gets you thinking. It's like a real life lesson in humility and perspective
Yeah.
and how easy it is to just criticize from the sidelines.
Okay, so let's set the scene here. First class cabin, flight 317 from LA to Tokyo. We've got Oliver Bennett, your typical tech bro disruptor. Successful startup, flashy persona, loves to hear himself talk, and he's throwing around disruptor like it's some badge of honor, and he's using his wealth to feel superior. Then there's his seatmate, described as the complete opposite, almost blending into the background.
Yeah, it's such an interesting contrast there because while Oliver's all about outward appearances, his seatmate, who we find out later is Elon Musk, he's in a hoodie and sneakers, sipping water instead of champagne. He's not playing into Oliver's attempts to one-up him at all.
And here's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Oliver, maybe fueled by a little liquid courage, launches into this full-on critique of Elon Musk and all his companies. SpaceX is reckless. Tesla's overrated. The whole Twitter takeover is a disaster,
Yeah.
basically hitting all the familiar criticisms.
Yeah, he's got specific examples ready to go too, like those exploding rockets.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even just that SpaceX is reckless. He sees it as wasteful. Remember, Oliver's coming from this mindset, where success equals traditional metrics. So he sees those explosions as failures, not the learning experiences they often are in the pursuit of innovation. And then there's Tesla. Oliver sees this as hypocrisy. Elon promotes sustainability but uses private jets. But he's missing the point of the impact that Tesla has on the environment and road safety through its innovations in electric vehicles and driver assistance technology.
Yeah, it's like he's pulling criticism straight from Twitter. What's amazing is how Elon handles all of this. He's incredibly restrained, offering these brief, neutral responses, almost like he's amused by Oliver's passion. There are these little hints about his identity
Yeah.
that Oliver completely misses, like the flight attendant addressing him as Mr. Musk. So easy to be focused on our own narratives that we just miss the obvious sometimes.
It's true. This is a perfect example of how our assumptions just totally shape our perception. Oliver comes in with these preconceived notions of what a powerful person looks and acts like. He completely misses the clues. It makes you wonder how often we do this in our own lives.
Right. We get so attached to our own ideas that we miss the nuances and the complexities that are right in front of us, and then boom, the big reveal. The flight attendant mentions
Yeah.
Mr. Musk, and Oliver's face probably turns whiter than the cabin lights. I can only imagine that awkward silence.
Yeah, it's like a classic foot and mouth moment. But it's more than just being embarrassing. It's about that sudden shift in power dynamics.
Yeah.
And that realization that your judgments were completely off base. Think about how this relates to your own life. Have you ever had a similar experience?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone's been there at some point. What I find fascinating is how Elon responds. Instead of getting defensive or putting Oliver in his place, he uses this opportunity to highlight the positive impacts of his work. He talks about Tesla's driver assistant saving lives and SpaceX's role in advancing space exploration, even contributing to protecting humanity from those extinction-level events Oliver was worried about. It's almost like he's saying, look, I hear your criticisms, but there's a bigger picture here.
It's a powerful lesson in perspective, isn't it? It makes you think about how quick we are to judge, often based on such limited information. And it also raises the question, are we as willing to engage with opposing viewpoints as we are to criticize them? It's much easier to sit back and critique than to actually try and create change.
That's a real challenge to all of us, isn't it? It's easy to be a critic from a distance, but to actually step up and build something meaningful, that takes a different kind of courage. But I am dying to know, how does Oliver react?
Well, let's just say Oliver's world just got a whole lot bigger, and that's a great place to pause for today. We'll pick up Oliver's story and dive into the lessons he learns in part 2. So you have to imagine Oliver's pretty mortified at this point, his whole carefully constructed image of himself as this all-knowing tech guru has just crashed and burned in front of the person he was just criticizing.
That's got to be a humbling experience, to say the least. It's like that moment when you realize you've been mansplaining something to an actual expert. I'm cringing just thinking about it. So what does Oliver do? Does he try to save face? Double down on his argument.
To Oliver's credit, he doesn't get defensive. He stumbles through an apology, admits he didn't realize who he was talking to.
Okay.
But what's interesting is Elon's response. He asks, Does it matter who you're talking to if the points are valid?
Ooh, that's a great question. He's not letting Oliver off the hook. Just because of the awkward situation, he's challenging him to think critically about his own arguments, regardless of who he's talking to.
Exactly. And this is where the conversation takes a turn. From a cringe-worthy encounter to a real learning opportunity, Elon doesn't just dismiss Oliver's criticisms, he addresses them head on.
Remember how Oliver was going on about Tesla
Yeah.
and the so-called hypocrisy of promoting sustainability while using private jets? What does Elon say to that?
Well, Elon counters. By focusing on the bigger picture, he explains the quantifiable positive impact Tesla has on the environment by accelerating the transition to sustainable energy through electric vehicles. He points out that Tesla is not just about cars, it's about creating a sustainable energy ecosystem.
That makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in the symbolism
Yeah.
and miss the actual progress being made.
Right. And remember how Oliver criticized SpaceX for being reckless and wasteful because of these exploding rockets? Elon reframes that by highlighting SpaceX's commitment to advancing space exploration and making it more affordable. He even emphasizes how their work is about pushing technological boundaries and ultimately protecting humanity from extinction-level events.
So he's basically saying that those explosions are part of the process of innovating and taking risks to achieve something truly groundbreaking.
Exactly. He's acknowledging that failure is often a necessary part of progress, especially when you're trying to do something that's never been done before.
Right.
And what about Oliver's take on Twitter? You know how he called the whole takeover a disaster?
Oh, yeah. That was a big part of Oliver's rant. I'm curious to see how Elon addresses that one.
Well, Elon admits that there's been chaos, but he argues that it's a necessary part of shaking things up and challenging the status quo. He suggests that ideas evolve through friction, and without it, there's no real progress. It's a pretty bold way of reframing what many people see as failure or disruption as an essential part of innovation.
So he's basically saying that to create something truly new, you have to be willing to break things,
Yeah,
even if it gets messy.
right. And he also makes the point that it's easy to judge from the outside, but much harder to actually be in the arena, making tough decisions and facing the consequences. He even gives Oliver a piece of advice that I think is really valuable for all of us. He says, the key is to keep moving forward.
That's powerful. It's a reminder that progress isn't always linear, and there are going to be setbacks and challenges along the way. But it's the persistence, the willingness to learn from mistakes and keep going, that ultimately leads to success. But what about Oliver? How does he take all this in?
Well, it's clear that this encounter has had a profound impact on him. He goes from being loud and opinionated to being uncharacteristically quiet and introspective. I think this is a sign of real growth. He's no longer trying to impress or dominate the conversation. He's actually listening, absorbing, and reflecting on what he's learned.
It's like that moment when the reality of your own ignorance hits you square in the face.
Yeah.
And you realize there's so much more to learn. It can be a pretty humbling experience, but it's also incredibly liberating.
And as they prepare to land in Tokyo, Oliver takes one final step that shows his newfound humility. He leans over to Elon and whispers, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was out of line. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but I can't imagine the weight of doing what you do.
Wow. That's a pretty big step for someone like Oliver, who started out this flight so sure of himself. It shows a real willingness to admit he was wrong and acknowledge the difference between being a critic and a creator.
And Elon's response is equally insightful. He says, it's not easy, but that's the nature of progress. You're always going to face resistance, especially from people who don't see the full picture.
He's acknowledging the challenges,
Mm-hmm.
but also encouraging Oliver to stay true to his vision and not be discouraged by those who don't understand.
And then he adds one final piece of advice that I think is worth unpacking in more detail. He says, I hope it's something that makes a difference.
That's interesting. It's like he's not just challenging Oliver to be successful, but to be impactful, to create something that contributes to the world in a positive way.
Exactly. It's a reminder that true success isn't just about personal gain or achievement. It's about using your talents and resources to make a meaningful contribution to something larger than yourself.
This entire conversation is giving me so much to think about. It's easy to get caught up in our own little bubbles. But this encounter between Oliver and Elon is a powerful reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to contribute.
It definitely challenges us to examine our own assumptions and biases, to be more open-minded, and to consider the bigger picture when forming our opinions.
And of course, it leaves us with that lingering question. What does Elon say to Oliver as they part ways in Tokyo? I guess we'll have to wait for part 3 to find out. Okay, so we're in Tokyo now. Oliver's just had this life-changing encounter with Elon Musk, realizing that his assumptions about success and innovation, and even Elon himself, were way off base.
Yeah, he's gone from this, like, arrogant critic to someone who's starting to understand the weight of actually trying to change the world. It's a transformation that a lot of us could probably benefit from.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. How often do we get so caught up in our own opinions that we miss the opportunity to really listen and learn from others, especially those who are challenging the status quo?
It's so easy to be a keyboard warrior, firing off critiques from a safe distance, but to actually step into the arena, to take on the risks and responsibilities of creating something new, that takes a different kind of courage. And that brings us back to Elon's final piece of advice to Oliver as they part ways in Tokyo. He says, find something you believe in, something bigger than yourself, and put your energy into that.
Wow. That's not just about career advice. That's about finding a sense of purpose, a mission that drives you forward, even when things get tough.
It's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from aligning your actions with your values, from contributing to something that you believe in deeply.
And it's a challenge to all of us, isn't it? To look beyond our own self-interest and consider how we can use our talents, our resources, our time to make a positive impact on the world. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind, but this story is a reminder that we all have the potential to create something meaningful, something that makes a difference. It's about asking ourselves, what do we believe in? What are we passionate about? And how can we channel that energy into something that contributes to a better future?
This whole encounter between Oliver and Elon, it's like a microcosm of the challenges and opportunities we all face. It's about humility, perspective, and the courage to pursue our passions, even in the face of criticism and uncertainty.
And sometimes the most profound lessons come from those unexpected encounters, from those moments that force us to step outside of our comfort zones and confront our own biases.
So as you go about your day, I encourage you to reflect on this story. What are some assumptions you hold that might benefit from a closer look or a different perspective? And what are some things you believe in, some things bigger than yourself, that you can put your energy into?
Because in the end, it's not just about being successful, it's about making a difference. And that's a journey we can all embark on, one step at a time.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.